Did Charlie Kirk call people mean names? Yes. Yes, he did. And I'll prove it in this video. Was Charlie Kirk a racist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi hater? Well, I crunched the numbers, I looked at the data, and the answers might surprise you. I invite you to step inside the shed and beam and add a little meaning to your day. Greetings, friends. Welcome back to the Shed and Beam. I'm your host, Thaddeus Williams. If you're at all like me, in light of recent events, you are frustrated at the fact that it seems like we're living in completely different universes. How our algorithms can send us down a pathway where we look at the same question and come up with polar opposite answers. Maybe you're sick and tired of the echo chambers. And so in this video, I want to tackle the question, is Charlie Kirk as hateful? Is Charlie Kirk as bigoted? Is Charlie Kirk as phobic as many of our algorithms would have us believe? And so a quick word about my methodology here. In the last 24 hours, I escaped my algorithms by using multiple devices, multiple IP addresses, multiple accounts, crowdsourcing information from people's accounts who don't agree with me worldview-wise. And so I was able to watch 100 videos of Charlie Kirk exchanging ideas with people who disagree with him. The results are going to surprise you. They were pretty shocking to me. Now, before we get into it, let me just say clearly, Charlie Kirk does call people names. All right, I'm going to document it. I'm going to show receipts. He calls people mean names. I'm going to document that. I'm going to show some receipts. But before we get to the specific examples, let me talk about a phenomena that I see happening in real time in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's a phenomena I describe in my book from a few years ago, Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth. Confronting injustice without compromising truth. I describe a phenomena I think we've all seen happening around us that I call the Newman effect. The Newman effect came from an interview a few years back between, the controversial Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson and Kathy Newman from Britain's, I think she's on Channel 4. And in this conversation, if you've seen the clip, it's just hilarious and sad all at the same time. Here's some examples.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that intelligent and
traits.
conscientious by implication are not female traits.
No.
I mean, that's very dangerous territory.
I'm not saying that at all.
You're saying that trans activists could lead to the deaths of millions of people. Let's get it straight. You're saying that we should organise our societies along the lines of the lobsters.
That became a running meme for the last 5 years, the "so you're saying" meme. And I describe it as the Newman effect because what Kathy Newman does in these clips is what a lot of us do in what has become the new normal. Examples. Somebody says, I think racism is still a problem. The Newman effect kicks in. So you're saying you're a cultural Marxist, CRT, far left winger. On the other foot, somebody says, I think this example that's hailed by the media as Exhibit A, that America is still deeply racist. I don't know that race is actually the best explanation for that. Newman effect kicks in. So you're saying you're a racist. So you're saying you're a white supremacist. So you're saying you're a neo-Nazi. So you're saying you're essentially the grand wizard of the KKK. Or think of the COVID debate, lockdowns. I think maybe these lockdowns aren't healthy. I think it's sort of a political power grab, and I don't know that it's good for little ones to be put in basically hazmat suits to play flute in the school band or to be locked up behind closed doors, not getting sunshine. So you're saying you want more old people to die. That's the Newman effect. Shoe on the other foot. Somebody says, I think we should wear masks, stand 6 feet apart. So you're saying you hate freedom and you love tyranny, right? Examples could be multiplied, but I'm saying that both sides do this right now, where we hear another perspective and we are quick to categorize it in the most damning inflammatory and cartoonish light that we possibly can. I think that what we've seen since the assassination of Charlie Kirk is the Newman effect playing out on a grand scale. Now, I'll prove that, but first, let's get to the facts. Again, I watched 100 videos. I tallied up anytime anybody called someone a name. In 100 videos, here's the results. In 44 out of 100 videos of Charlie Kirk engaging people who disagree with them, in 44 of those videos, so not quite half, but in 44, nobody called anybody names. There was no hateful rhetoric or anything like that. Now, with 44 having no name calling, if you're decent at math, you know that means in 56 videos, so in the majority of Charlie Kirk exchanges, there is, in fact, name calling. Now, let's break it down further. In those 56 videos where name calling happens, it is Charlie Kirk's opponents, people disagreeing with him, who call him a total of 59 names. 59 names in 56 videos. Now, I won't go through the whole list, but to give you a sense, Charlie is called little, stupid, insane, honorless, classless, hated, weird, freak, loser, pathetic, spineless, cowardly, sick, racist, piece of trash, a Nazi, Hitler, dangerous, evil, scumbag, piece of beep, a sissy, a repulsive moron. So many here that I can't read without this video getting banned. But I assure you, it's not pretty. In 100 videos, 59 times Charlie gets called names. There was not a single one of those instances where Charlie matched the energy and returned evil for evil. And not a single one of them did he, after being called a name, call somebody else a name. I think that's important, and I think that speaks to character. I know if I was called that many names, I'd probably lash out at least once in over 50 examples. So let's put the shoe on the other foot. How many times does Charlie Kirk call people names in those 56 out of 100 videos where names are called, where people are insulted? And here's the hard facts in my study. Feel free to reproduce this on your own. Good science is public and testable. Test all this, see if a similar picture emerges if you run the experiment. But in those 56 videos, out of the 100 in which people are called names, Charlie calls people names 11 times. 11 times. And again, that's compared to 59 names that he is called. He calls people names 11 times in 100 exchanges, so about 1 in 10 times Charlie calls people a name. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. There's one clip of him that has been viewed 16 million times on X. 16 million times on X. And the clip is used as exhibit A of what an evil, hateful, racist Charlie Kirk was. And in that clip, Charlie Kirk can be heard yelling the name of Cenk Uygur, who's the head of the Young Turks. And he's yelling at him in a debate, and he's saying, Cenk, 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 literally saying his name. And the way it's edited and the way it's reposted and the way it's viewed over 16 million times, he's not saying Cenk, he's saying a racial slur, which he just wasn't. This is what I mean by us living in different universes, in our algorithms, in our echo chambers, skewing our understanding of just basic reality. In fact, try this little experiment. Go onto ChatGPT or Grok and ask, where's the evidence that Charlie Kirk has used a racial slur? And you will find what I found. It says, based on extensive searches across web sources and X, formerly Twitter, there are no verified cases of Charlie Kirk using a racist slur. So I said he's called people names 11 times. Let's go a little deeper. Here it gets super fascinating. Listen to some of the names Charlie Kirk called people publicly. The first example was he called somebody a low IQ loser. A low IQ loser. Here's a question. Who is he calling a low IQ loser? He was calling a young man who was praising Hitler a low IQ loser. So he's not pushing white supremacy. He's not pushing neo-Nazism. He's calling anybody who would praise Hitler a low IQ loser. Second example, he calls people idiots in one clip. So the second of the 11 examples, he calls people idiots. Who's he calling idiots? Well, watch the video. You can find it for yourself. He's calling out a group called Identity Evropa. Identity Evropa, it's a now defunct, thankfully they've since fallen apart, but it's a now dismantled white supremacist neo-Nazi organization. That's who he's calling idiots, to be clear. Third example, Charlie Kirk calls a hypothetical young man a loser. So he's not directing this to anybody in particular. He's describing a type of young man who doesn't stand for anything, who doesn't get off his butt and do something in the world, but he lives off his parents' dime, probably in their basement, playing video games 24/7. So he calls hypothetical young men who live like that losers. In the context, he's trying to inspire, like he did for many, a young generation to put down their game controllers and go out and do something good for the world. So there's 3 examples. Let's continue. Example number 4 of Charlie Kirk calling somebody a name is on his podcast when he describes someone as a tranny. Now, I looked this up, and the person he's calling a tranny self-identifies as a tranny, as many in the transvestite community call themselves. I don't know that that qualifies choosing somebody's chosen moniker as hate speech or bigotry or phobia. 5th example, he uses the insult. It is name calling. He calls somebody a freak. And in the context of the video, he is referring to an individual by the name of Dimitri Daskalakis. Look up Dimitri, and you'll see him in S&M gear, flaunting BDM in a way that I don't think it's hateful to describe as freakish. In fact, many within the BDSM community also describe themselves as freaks and celebrate it. So again, I don't think we've risen to the level of bigotry, hatred, or phobia. 6th example of Charlie Kirk calling somebody a name. In a debate about Muslims killing Jews, he refers to, quote, stupid Muslims who kill Jews. Now again, just apply some basic common sense here. Does that mean he's saying all Muslims are stupid? No. In the context, in the sentence, he's saying it's stupid to kill Jews. So if you're a Muslim killing Jews, which obviously isn't every Muslim, he's referring specifically to a subgroup within Islam who are killing Jews, and he's referring to them as stupid. I don't think that's hateful. I don't think there's anything phobic or Islamophobic happening there, but decide for yourself. Okay, so here's example number 7. This one's been blowing up on many social media accounts. There's a clip of Charlie Kirk referring to Joy Reid, Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and he says, you do not have the brain processing power to be otherwise taken seriously. He says you were affirmative action hires. Then he shows a clip of one of them, Sheila Jackson Lee, saying that she got her position, her education through affirmative action. So it's not name calling here. He's simply quoting her and shows a clip of her referring to herself as a recipient of affirmative action. A racist would refer to an entire race as inferior. Here, in the first example, he's referring to 4 specific women that in his personal judgment aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. That's his opinion about 4 specific women. In this context, he's not referring to all Black people. Then he goes on to say, it's very obvious to us you were not smart enough to get in on your own. Narcissistic, bitter, resentful activists who hate white people. So look, I wouldn't use those kinds of terms. I generally don't trade in that kind of rhetoric. It's not really my jam. But understand there's a very clear difference between calling out 4 specific individuals in the context of describing DEI hiring and affirmative action, which just understand from his perspective, whether you agree with it or not, DEI hires on the basis of melanin, it ranks that higher than merit. That's a fact. Do your homework. I'll leave receipts down in the description below. I've written several articles. There's entire sections on DEI in my book with over 300 footnotes covering all sides of this issue. DEI really does prioritize melanin over merit. And if that's the case, then it's just common sense. It's not racism to say certain people are going to get their jobs not primarily based on merit, but because of melanin. Like, it's just sort of true by definition. And it's true in experience. And this relates to another, I guess this would be number 8 time he called names, even though it's not specifically a name he's calling. But he says, and I quote, "If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified." 2 ways to interpret this. Number 1 is in the most damning light possible. Charlie Kirk is a neo-Nazi racist saying black people aren't qualified to fly planes. White people are supreme at piloting. That's one way. That's one way to interpret it that will reinforce a narrative that many folks cherish these days. There's another way to interpret it, which I think is actually a much truer interpretation. In the context, Charlie mentions how when DEI policies are enacted, the standards are lowered across the board. Look it up. When DEI or race-based hiring becomes a thing, just look at the cases of Harvard trying to implement DEI. They got taken to task for this at the Supreme Court, where people who had more melanin were getting in with test scores that were far below their Asian counterparts. And so he's making a simple, like, common sense observation that in a context where DEI hiring is sweeping the nation, it's not racist to ask the kind of question Charlie Kirk did. But maybe you're not convinced. But let's try to hear in his own words. There's a clip of him in the 100. One of the clips is somebody calling him a white supremacist. Listen to this response, please. Hear what he actually has to say about it.
Would a white supremacist organization host a Black Leadership Summit?
Yes. You can be...
Would a white supremacist organization have a black female communications director for over a
Yes,
year and a
there are
half?
ideological shields. Yes, there are ideological shields that further your talking points and who are every much as committed to bigotry and white supremacy.
Would a white supremacist organization host the nation's largest young Latino leadership summit for 5 years straight?
Yes.
Can you name one instance when we have ever tolerated hatred once?
When you have ever tolerated hatred?
Yes.
Well, you claim that your organization is not white nationalist and not white supremacist. So why did Identity Europa think that your organization was prime breeding grounds for their views?
Because they're idiots.
Because they're idiots. So wait. No, I wanna have an honest discussion with you, right? Because I do agree that you should look in the mirror first before asking people to solve your problems. Just tell me honestly, what do you think it is about your organization, without you being a white supremacist, without you being a white nationalist?
So you don't think I'm a white supremacist? Let's just get this straight.
No.
Okay, good.
I think you enable it.
Oh, I enable?
Yes.
Despite every time I encounter anyone around that ideology, I repudiate it and I reject it.
I'm asking you
what
why
else
you
would
feel,
you want me to do?
I'm asking you why you feel that what it is you think about your organization that might attract white supremacists and white nationalists, because you've repudiated a lot of members who were later revealed to have white nationalist ties.
It's not a lot of members. You're talking about 4 people in a membership organization with hundreds of thousands of students over 7.5-year history. You're looking at 4 isolated examples that the dishonest press decides to look at, despite the unbelievable body of work that Turning Point USA rejects anyone that has hatred. Turning Point USA has diverse leadership summits, such as a Black Leadership Summit, and you kind of lost me after that one, by the way, that you could host a Black Leadership Summit and also be white supremacist.
Again, cut through the static, escape the echo chambers, hear his own words. He says, I will push back against the belief that the conservative movement should excommunicate individuals simply under the fact that they are gay or lesbian. In another quote, you know how we heal our divides? By talking to people we disagree with. In another quote, I want us to get to a place where we see each other as fellow human beings, fellow humans. Another example, when we stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. Can you agree with Charlie here? I know in our black and white culture with everything so polarized, you have to think he's all evil, but can you at least see there's more shades to the reality here? He continues and says, what we as a culture have to do is get back to having a reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option. For all the people out there saying, oh, Charlie, he inspired violence, listen to the dude's own words. How many times was he personally violent, or take the millions of young people in his orbit and encourage them to be violent? Here's what he says in another quote. He says, part of what it means to be a Christian is to be long-suffering and patient and loving and kind. Jesus talked to all people. He had dinner with tax collectors. He had dinner with prostitutes. What it means to be a Christian, my friend, is to be open-minded yet firm in your beliefs. Now, there's one more example. It's not specifically name calling. I recognize that name calling isn't the only way to be hateful. There's other ways to inspire bigotry and phobia and all those things. And so that's why I'm expanding my analysis when I was watching all these videos to not specific name callings, but things that he said that were, according to many, unchristlike or lacking kindness or sometimes inspiring hate. So one of the big ones out there is his comments about empathy. His comments about empathy. He says, and I quote, I can't stand the word empathy. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage. Now, what happens when that's where you end the quote? Charlie Kirk is saying, boo empathy. I've seen a lot of my friends on the left trip over this particular quote because shouldn't we be empathetic? What does Charlie say in the very next breath? In the next breath, he says, sympathy I prefer more than empathy. Sympathy. And so he's getting into a linguistic debate about which word best explains how we should care about people who are suffering. He is not saying don't care about people who are suffering. So I know there's been a few books that have hit the market recently, one by Allie Beth Stuckey, one by Joe Rigney, who are criticizing empathy. And here's the problem with our political moment. You see the title of the book, like Toxic Empathy or The Sin of Empathy, and you think, oh my goodness, they're so anti-caring about others without reading what they're actually saying. What they're saying isn't actually all that controversial. They're saying there are ways that we can take something like empathy and weaponize it. For example, if I say, look at this example of a family that lost a child to violence at the hands of an illegal immigrant, and now you're supporting immigration? Where's your empathy? And so now you can play people's emotions to support your political aim. In the same way, in the opposite direction. Look at this poor family that's getting deported. And they were hardworking. Yeah, they were here illegally, but look at the humanity of it. Don't you care about the humanity? What Rigney, what Allie Beth Stuckey, and what Charlie Kirk were exposing is not caring about others deeply. What they're against is the weaponization of empathy such that anybody who disagrees with your policy is unempathetic, a heartless, cruel monster. That's a common sense point. He's not saying boo caring about others. So we've covered a lot. Quick recap. We've seen in 100 videos that there is no name calling from either side in 44 of those videos. In 56 of those videos, names were called. 59 times Charlie Kirk was insulted in some pretty heinous ways if you look at the footage, but there's 59 examples in 100 videos of Charlie Kirk being called all kinds of unsavory names, not the other way around. And in none of those does he ever lash back. In fact, I encourage you, watch the videos, how many times he's being insulted and the crowd gets riled up and they're like, oh. And what does Charlie do more often than not? He'll say things like, hey, everybody calm down. Let's hear what they have to say. Doesn't sound like a bigoted, hateful, phobic to me. How many times, if you watch his videos, does he say to somebody who disagrees with him, not only cut the line, let's have the conversation. If you disagree with me, you get the mic next. but how many times does he congratulate somebody for their courage in being willing to talk to him publicly about hard topics? Now, we saw out of those 100 videos, 56 of which names are called. In 11 examples, Charlie is the one doing the name calling. We saw that in 2 cases, he's calling white supremacists and actual Nazis names. In 1, he's inspiring young men to not be losers, to not just sit on their butt and play video games all day, to put down their video game controllers and contribute to the world. Then we saw 5 examples where he's saying things that, sure, if you want to turn him into this monster, there's a certain way you could interpret those words. But I'm showing you there's another, I think, more plausible explanation for even those. So again, I wouldn't say things the way he does, but to put things in perspective, you have over 1,000 episodes of the Charlie Kirk Show podcast, over 1,000 episodes. You have hundreds of campus speeches and more than 50,000 X posts since he joined the platform. And there's these 5 examples. I'm sure some of you could go do some internet sleuthing and find maybe a handful more, but ask yourself, like, what is it in the wake of many people being traumatized that a man was gunned down in the act of practicing free speech and engaging people who disagreed with him, that he was gunned down in front of his wife and kids? Like, honestly, ask yourself, what is it that makes me want to go and find examples to prove to the world that he's really a monster and good riddance? And here's a ratio you might want to consider. How much time have you spent trying to find footage or clips or quotes of Charlie being mean versus what's the ratio between that and time you've spent really being empathetic, reaching out to people who are really traumatized by the events of the last week and just checking in, saying, you doing okay? That footage was pretty traumatic. I'll say for me personally, I'm on the road a lot. I just got back from Texas last week. I'm flying to Indianapolis. I'm all over the place. And I'm engaging very tough conversations about things like racism and sexuality. And I will tell you, the day this happened, my wife was very shaken up because she's been concerned for years because I have been on the receiving end of being called all kinds of dehumanizing names. And so I did have a very small handful of folks reach out to me. I'm very grateful for these friends within a day or two and be like, how you doing, man? You doing okay? So I would just encourage folks out there, be more sympathetic and less quick to just Google to vindicate your political ideology. Now, if you're paying attention, I said that there were 11 times Charlie Kirk called people names. And of those 11, we've only talked about 8. I found one clip, and this is where things get super interesting. One clip where Charlie calls names 3 times in a single 10-second span. So this is Charlie Kirk calling people names. This was the most vivid example, the most names he ever called anybody in a single quote. Here it is.
I'm a sinner, I'm selfish, I'm broken, and only thanks to Jesus' perfect sacrifice, coming and living a perfect life, that I get something I do not earn, but has been given to me, this free gift of eternal life.
Did you catch that? There's the name calling. I'm a sinner, says Charlie. I'm selfish, says Charlie. I'm broken, says Charlie. I need Jesus, says Charlie.
I get something I do not earn, but has been given to me, this free gift of eternal life.
Okay, so there you have it. There's the evidence. And I'm sure, I didn't find every quote. We can, go down a rabbit hole and find, oh, well, you didn't address this one. You didn't address this one. I'm not really down to play that game. I'm open. If you want to, share other evidence, I'm open. I'll check it out. But here's the question. In light of the evidence we just looked at, we could ask, why are so many people convinced to their core that Charlie was such a terrible, hurtful, hate-filled, racist, phobic, neo-Nazi, and all the rest of the names? Why do so many people believe that in light of what I think is concrete evidence that I gathered from outside my algorithms, deliberately crowdsourcing what are the worst things you can find Charlie saying from several friends who are deeply opposed to him? And again, of the 11 examples that I was able to find, 3 of those he's calling himself names. 2, he's calling neo-Nazis names. 1, he's inspiring young men to not be losers, to go work for the world. In 5, he's not calling out an entire race in any of those 5. So all that to say, why is the narrative so popular that Charlie Kirk spurred hate? Let me suggest what I think is an answer to that question. Goes back to where we started, the Newman effect. The Newman effect. This is what I mean. If Charlie Kirk disagrees with transgenderism, the Newman effect kicks in. Oh, so you must be transphobic, or you must hate LGBTQ people. I don't agree with trans ideology. I've done a lot of research. It's out there for public consumption. I've got receipts. I've got mile-long lists of endnotes, footnotes, documenting research from both sides on this stuff. I am opposed to trans ideology, not because I hate or am afraid of trans folks, but precisely the opposite, because I love them. I am opposed to things like critical race theory, having studied it for years in the academic level. I've been teaching about CRT for over 10 years, going back before it was a cultural hot button issue at a law school in Southern California. I'm opposed to CRT and I'm opposed to DEI, not because I'm racist or white supremacist or neo-Nazi, but precisely because I love people with more melanin than me. And I've done the homework to see how these ideologies are deeply hurtful to my fellow image bearers of God. Under the Newman effect, if somebody says, I'm for free markets, which Charlie certainly was, and against socialism, Newman effect kicks in. You just don't care about the poor people and you're just blaming the victim. They're poor and you're saying it's all their fault because they're lazy and you really don't give a rip about them. I am against socialism precisely because I care about the poor and want to uplift people economically. That's precisely why I'm against socialism. Now, you might not agree with my conclusions on all that, but please, this is what the problem with how people are interpreting Charlie. He disagreed with the transgender movement. Newman effect, therefore, he's hateful, he's bigoted, he's spreading violence and all this stuff. We just got to do better than that. And let me explain why. I'm a theologian. Let me get theological for 10 seconds here. When we call people names, when we resort to that level of dialogue, we're sinning. We're committing at least 3 specific sins. Number 1, we're slandering people if what we're saying about them isn't true to reality. Number 2, we're bearing false witness, breaking one of the 10 commandments. And number 3, we're breaking the second greatest commandment, to love our neighbors as ourselves. So wrapping up here, let's avoid the sins of slander, bearing false witness, failing to love our neighbors as ourselves. And please hear me, friends on the left, I got nothing but love for you, but can we please take the evidence seriously here? Stop slandering, bearing false witness, and failing to love our recently assassinated neighbor as ourselves. And I'll leave you with the words of a progressive Christian who had a lot to say after Charlie Kirk's assassination. He said, "I'm begging my white conservative Christian friends to please consider the rhetoric they listen to. Words matter, and we must consider how the rhetorical has real world consequences." To that, I say a hearty amen. So I would just echo what Tim Whitaker is saying here and just say it to my friends, brothers, sisters on the left as well. How about all of us take our words more seriously and understand that words have consequences, rather than anybody to my right is automatically a fascist. Anybody to my right is automatically a neo-Nazi. Anybody to my right is automatically a transphobe or whatever dehumanizing label we want to slap on them. Or anybody to my left is automatically a Marxist, or anybody to my left is, automatically a black supremacist, or anybody. Like, as Christians in particular, we need to move past that. I think it's time to just break out of our echo chambers, stop resorting to the slander, stop resorting to the false witness. So final thought, and then I'll shut up, is from the pen of one of my heroes, C.S. Lewis, who actually I named The Shed and Beam after his brilliant essay meditations in a tool shed. I'll talk about that in a future video. But he says this, final word. This is for my friends who I love on the left, my friends who I love on the right. Just hear what Lewis has to say. He says, suppose one reads a story of filthy atrocities in the paper, then suppose that something turns up suggesting that the story might not quite be true or not quite so bad as it was made out. Is the first feeling, thank God, even they aren't quite so bad as that? Or is our first feeling a feeling of disappointment or even a determination to cling to the first story for the sheer pleasure of thinking your enemies are as bad as possible? If it is that second mentality, then it is, I'm afraid, the first step in a process which, if followed to the end, will make us into devils. Thanks, and I'll see you next time at the Shed and Beam. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, take 5 seconds, like, subscribe, share it with some friends, and I'll see you next time.